Welcome back to the From Field to Plate podcast. My name is Jeremiah Dowdy, your host here today. And today I'm talking to one of Canada's, I don't know, like we say Canada Goose, but some people say Canadian Goose. He's one of the sweethearts over there. He's like 6'6", built like a freaking tank. I remember the first time I met this man. I'm a fairly large guy at 6'1", 240 pounds. I'm a big dude. And I remember looking up going, damn, this is a big dude. So anyway, Joe, please introduce yourself and we will get right into this summer series Cookout.
Well, brother, I appreciate the pleasant intro there. A sweetheart of Canada. I think that's the first I've ever had that label. But yeah, I'm a Canadian boy. I'm actually back in my hometown here in British Columbia, Canada, so right on the coast. Grew up hunting, fishing. My mom ran the local mushroom buying shop. The outdoors has always been a big part of my life. And then my career took me away into professional athletics. I actually played college ball down in the States at Washington State. And then I ended up playing pro ball in the Canadian Football League, CFL, for about 5 years. After that, I went back to school, got my MBA, got a little book learned or book educated, as they say,
Yeah,
and
right.
got into marketing and sales. And then, yeah, my career kind of took me into a media sales position at Wild TV, which is Canada's major kind of hunting network up here. And through that, I had an opportunity to start um, test out a role as a host on a TV show, basically, through the network. And 6 years later, here I am. My role at the network, multiple networks now, has grown quite a bit. And my role in the outdoor community has grown quite a bit as well with the show, as well as with some of the different conservation groups I work with. And I got a 2.5-year-old boy and my wife that love being out in the bush too. So it's really my lifestyle is in the outdoors, and very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I have a lot of friends who are ex-professional athletes that turn into this hunting industry. And I think the mechanics and the methods behind sports really plays into the mechanics and the methods behind being a truly good hunter, just from the standpoint of never giving up, endurance,
Mhm.
pushing your body beyond its limits. Um, do you agree in a sense that is like pushing yourself on the football field is the same as pushing yourself up that stinking mountain to go chase that bighorn?
I agree so much so that during my athletic career, during when I was playing pro ball and when I was at Washington State, I'd get interviewed and people would ask me, what kind of drove to the mindset that pushed me to excel in sports. And I said that it was my upbringing in the outdoors. So hunting and going on hunts and doing everything right, still having the hunt not play out. You learn how to lose. You learn how to push it in the bush. You learn how to suffer. You learn situational awareness, and a lot of the life skills I learned through hunting eventually translated into success in professional sports. And then my additional skills I learned from my professional sports then looped right back into the outdoors when I was able to get right back into the bush. So absolutely, I think the two fed into each other in a really big way.
Yeah, I think, and it's just, it's crazy too, because I get called a lot for my classes with professional athletes who, one of their biggest things right now is to eat more clean, to eat better, to, they're at the peak of their performance. I'm down here in Southern California, so I get a lot of the LA Kings guys reaching out to me like, hey, where do I get meat that isn't from a grocery store? Where do I do this? Where do I do that? And so I'm going to meeting with these guys. Just, I've got freezers and freezers in my garage full of meat because that's just how it is. And I just am giving these guys stuff, and to watch their mindset and their bodies change when they start to put in this real food is huge. And to watch them then say, hey, can you teach us? Can you take us through this process?
Mhm.
And I have hunted with hundreds of professional hunters, people who are on television shows, people who do this for a living, and they've got it right. They understand the mechanics, the methods. They're used to it. When you take out a sports guy for the first time, it's funny how fast they click and how fast their mind goes
Mhm.
into, oh, this is the mechanics of what I'm doing, right? We took out the long snapper for Buffalo Bills, Reed Ferguson, for his first real deer hunt in Texas. And there's, I think we had like 100 doe tags we could fill on this property, 40,000 acres. And so
Wow.
there's these two does lined up at like 340, 350 yards. And so I put them down on a rifle and I'm like, okay. And so whenever you feel comfortable, don't worry about hitting both, because if we line them up right, you can hit both because we have so many tags. You're using a bigger round, blah, 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 blah. The whole, it was legal and we could do it without even hesitation. He's like, and doesn't even lift his head. Looks, and he's like, did I get, we're like, yeah. And we go over there and there's just this whole, like, this dude's never done this really before. And he's just dropping stuff at 400 yards. And we got talking. He goes, oh, it's just like throwing a football. Like, it's just put your headspace in there. And so I think it's kind of fun to see folks like yourself who have transitioned from the one extreme to another extreme. So, but yeah, besides that, I know that we can talk about sports and the coalition of hunting and everything else, but kind of tell me a little bit of your journey of getting out of sports into the media stuff, and then how it kind of progressed into that, because I know that you're a big foodie as well. Like, you can go back and look at your Instagram from back when you've got a full head of hair like myself back when we were younger,
That's
and
going
you're,
way back.
yeah, and you're in Washington and you're catching crabs, you're cooking crabs and all this other stuff. Like, kind of how did that transition of, like, I want to get into this media aspect of it. I want to get into the hunting world with,
Mhm.
the Canadian broadcasting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it goes way, way back. Even before that, as a kid, my friends would wake up and watch cartoons on the weekends, and I was waking up to watch the early morning hunting shows because up here in Canada, we didn't have a lot of them available. So you had to be like early morning, Saturday, Sunday to get some of those programs before that network switched back over. But oddly enough, I always saw the hunting industry as a dream that was completely unattainable, like just so far out of the realm. I was in a small town, blacktail hunted for meat. Um, so the athletics was, a realistic avenue for me to pursue. So I pursued a career in professional sports, got to live that dream. And then throughout my entire career, I've always really enjoyed working on things that I was bad at. So, I mean, I was very self-conscious growing up and I couldn't speak in front of a room. Like if there was two people in front of me, I'd stutter and stammer and have a lisp. I couldn't talk. So I started getting involved in groups where we read to classes at schools, gave presentations, did a lot of that stuff and worked on my um, public speaking fear, which eventually led me to have, I guess, rep roles with a lot of different groups and companies while I was at Washington State. And then when I played professional football in Toronto, which is a big media hub. And because I was always very open about the fact that I was an active hunter, there was times you can imagine Toronto is a very urban area,
Yeah.
very unexposed to the hunting community at times. And because of my role with the media outlets, when stuff came on the media with hunting, they would call me in sometimes and ask me my opinion. So sorry for this long, long
No, no,
story,
yeah.
but I ended up on this kind of public platform and speaking quite a bit. And then when I realized I wanted to retire from sports, so I walked away from sports and I wanted to take my life to the next step. So I went back to school, got involved in sales. And after that, I got a role in athletic supplements. I managed Western Canada for an athletic supplement company, but I just wasn't in love with the industry. It was those things were pertinent to my life more so when I was playing professional football, but afterwards, I just didn't love the industry, so I was keeping an eye out for different opportunities just to work in the sales side of things. Like I didn't care. I thought like, man, if I can be a sales guy for boots in the hunting industry and just be around people that hunt again, be around an industry that I'm passionate about, that would be amazing. And I saw a sales position open up with Wild TV, very introductory level position, but I said, screw it. I applied and yeah, I got accepted on for like base level with the network. And then they started looking at my resume and they're like, dude, like you're way over without pumping my own tires, you're way overqualified for this role. Like you just got your master's
Yeah.
and you've represented all these companies, you've been in front of all these, and TVs and spoken everywhere, and you have an extensive background in the outdoors. I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing. So um yeah, they kind of opened up a position for me, potentially host a show. And it was very much like we're going to give you a shot. If you screw it up, you're done.
Yeah.
And if you do all right, you can stick around. We'll potentially grow with you. And yeah, over 6 years, um, put out some episodes and people, I guess, didn't hate it because they kept us around. The ratings did well enough. And then, yeah, just sharing honestly, it's just been about sharing my passion. Like it was always my number one passion from a young age: hunting, fishing, mushrooming. Like I mentioned, my mom ran the local mushroom buying station, so like wild game meat. And I'll be honest, growing up, like we ate a lot of wild game meat, but it was a lot of it's wild game meat's really lean.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of cooking wild game meat like beef and then struggling through a really dry roast
Yeah, for
or
sure.
getting through these meals and then covering it in all these wild mushrooms, which are delicious to kind of make it palatable. But growing up, I was always like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So as I got bigger, as I was a professional, when I was a professional athlete, I was an O lineman. I was living on my own and I had to be 320 plus pounds. So you get pretty good at,
Yeah.
making your own food. So then when I was getting way back into my love for the outdoors, I started looking at these dishes and being like, hey, how can I make this venison not taste like boot leather anymore? And that's kind of where I started experimenting with a lot of my cooking. And now I'd say I'm half decent. And I've been pretty successful at introducing a lot of friends and family to wild game meat who had negative associations with wild game meat. And now all of a sudden they're begging me for roasts and clearing out most of my freezers every time I go hunting because they want to get
Yeah.
their hands on it.
You'd be surprised how many of us in the outdoor industry that are in the cooking aspect of it have a very, very, very similar story. I remember, again, I was born and raised chasing birds. Like that's what we've done. Many people have heard me tell, but I was, if it flies, it dies mentality from 6 years old. Like, cause here in Southern California, we are that, that not really a big hunting mecca, right? And you have to go 2-3 hours to even pursue game outside of city limits and fill in the blanks. And so birds were an easy thing. We can go to the desert and chase dove, quail, chukar, pheasant, right? We're on the lower end of the Pacific Flyway, so we get all the birds that are stopping from you guys. So thank you for not killing all of our birds in the beginning. And they'll stop with us, and they usually don't even make it down to Mexico because our weather's perfect, right? So they'll chill out in Southern California. So our later season Pacific Flyway hunts are just ridiculous. We've got, turkeys were reintroduced into the San Diego mountains with like a Rio Miriam hybrid back in the 70s, which that population exploded. We've got huge kind of Central California with our hogs and our blacktail, our mule deer. And so, but the birds itself was where I cut my teeth. And to this day, it's still, I've hunted all over the world, just like you. I have killed critters of all sizes. And to me, it's still going back to the basics of shooting birds, shooting dove. Yeah. But I grew up with that overcooked, just Lowry seasoning salt on dove breast, right? And you're sitting there just chewing on this boot leather. It's like, yeah, dove's good. It's like our friends are like, hey, you want dove? I'm like, yeah, you can have some dove. Cause we shot 100 of them last weekend. And then looking at like now how I've prepared dove for people that grew up in that, it's not just cut off the breast, wrap it in bacon, jalapenos and cream cheese and make a dove popper. And there you go. It's good. Or even the ducks, waterfowl guys down here, they don't want to touch ducks. They're like, oh, I'll shoot them, but who wants to eat them? Cause they're disgusting. And I'm like, it's cause you're cooking it wrong. But we had to struggle through growing up thinking this is the only way venison is. This is the only way that ducks are. This is the only way that you can cook a wild turkey is overcooked or making, nuggets. If I see one more turkey nugget, and it's funny to hear your story the same way. It's like, but that's how we grew up and we still enjoyed it. But to look at the recipes that we were eating back then of boot leather to what we're eating now, it's no wonder why, some of my pins are over 1 million pins on Pinterest because people are like, oh, I can do that with that. Oh, I can create that with that. So I think that's huge. And that's one cool thing to see what you're doing as well, is you're not just doing the hunting aspect of it. There's so many of the professional guys out there that it's the trigger pull is the end, right? The grip and grin, that's it. Or your signature, like over the shoulder, look up at the camera with the animal dead behind you. Like it doesn't end there. Your Instagram and your other stuff is completely flooded full of food, and telling that story, which is one of the reasons that I think you and I connected, talking. Cause I think first time I saw you, I'm like, hey, you want to try this bobcat jerky? And you were like, yeah, let's go for it. So, but no, I think that's awesome that's that position. So looking at your kind of all the meats that you're filling your freezer with now, what is your go-to? What is your favorite like protein that's in your fridge right now? Because I know it's like picking your favorite kid. I've got multiple. You only have one, so you only have one favorite kid.
Thanks for putting me in such a tough spot here. Yeah, with food right now, I'm meat in the freezer. Um, the one that we've really been enjoying this year, that was a big surprise, is caribou.
Oh
So I
yeah.
took my first mountain caribou last year, and everybody said if you got it after a certain date, they'd be very ruddy and the meat would be terrible. And I shot it, my caribou, we finally got him down. We had some weather complications. I got him down, I think, like 15 days, like half a month after that date that everybody said, this is the cutoff date.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be ready. He was rutted up. He had a broken off tine in his foreshank. Like, I was worried 100% that I'm just going to have this rutted up, nasty caribou. And I brought it home and I've cooked it up for a bunch of people, and it's been absolutely delicious. Um, so the caribou has been a big surprise, really beautiful, tender meat. But aside from that, I mean, we're fortunate. I've got 5 freezers
Yeah.
in my carport, and they're all stacked right now. Um, Blacktail, like the local blacktail, is pretty tough to beat for me, especially because I do a lot of mushroom foraging in the area. So like pine mushroom, chanterelles, cauliflower mushrooms, bear's tooth mushrooms. So being able to cook the blacktail meat with the mushrooms you're picking in the area, for me, I mean, just going back to my childhood, yes, the dishes are much tastier now, but still that pairing of the blacktail meat with those wild mushrooms that were harvested in the same season, that's, I think, like subconsciously, that's going to be locked in there as one of my top meals forever.
Yeah. And it's, I get made fun of quite a bit at different deer camps and hunting camps because I'm going through the stomachs, I'm going through the gullets, I'm going through the crops of different animals because I want to see what they're eating. I want to see
Mm-hmm.
what their flavor profile is going to be, because food determines how they're going to taste, right? Shooting a coastal black bear during the salmon spawn, it's going to taste very fishy. It's going to taste very
Oh yeah.
off. But shooting a black bear that's up on the hills eating grass and blueberries, phenomenal eating with zero fishy taste, zero, the fat is purple and beautiful and gorgeous. So looking at what's going into the animal is huge. And so hearing you pair, for me, it's a big deal. Like I remember opening up the gullets of turkeys and seeing, rosemary and lemon seeds and lemon peels, and looking over and seeing, a lemon grove, and then seeing around the lemon grove, they have rosemary so that the bees come and, cross pollinate. And so I walk over, and so of course I have to create a dish surrounded by this. I went over and picked wild rosemary, or the rosemary, grabbed some lemons and made this beautiful lemon rosemary dish with this wild turkey. The same exact way that you said, because there's something nostalgic about where the animal lives, what the animal's eating, where the animal's a part of, that we want to honor that in some sort of way. So for you to hear you say, like, pick the mushrooms in the same season that the mushrooms are being, it's just, to me, there's nothing more basic than human beings than creating a dish from your environment. And I think we get away from that so much now in today's fast food world, where you're getting, when we were growing up, there was seasons for different foods, right? Like
Right.
we had friends that grew up in New Jersey, and they're like, they would come down here. They're like, you guys have apples? It's not apple season here in Jersey, or, when it's snowing, you're not going to be growing certain tomatoes. You're not going to be growing. And so now with the way that food is, it's, you can have whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, from anywhere in the world. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of taken away the real aspect of what food is. And so, I mean, it's rad to hear you talk on that subject of pairing the mushrooms with with the blacktail.
No, absolutely. I think it's important to try and bring out those profiles. And I mean, for me too, when you can introduce, I mean, we know, as much as I do, a good meal or the eating experience or the dining experience is as much about obviously the food, but when it comes to hunting, it's about the story behind it, about the
Yeah.
harvest, it's about the season. So I think if your dish can talk and tell a story as much as the actual story behind it can, it almost takes people through it, right? So now you're eating the mushrooms that you were picking when you got your deer. Again, it just ties a person to that time of the year, it ties them to that story that much more. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you do a far, far better job than I do, but I'm trying.
No,
I
you're doing.
every now and then I stumble across a winner.
Yeah, no, it's, I love looking at stuff that comes out, and for me, kind of food itself, I love looking at all of it. I love
Mm-hmm.
looking at, I mean, even the crappy, like there's on my Facebook page for From Field to Plate, there's like 16,000 or 18,000 followers, and it's all based on food. Just share your food with wild game. if you share any trophy pictures, it's deleted. Like unless there's a trophy picture with a food aspect of it. And there's this one lady on there, Becky. If you're listening, Becky, I love you to death. She's this older lady, and she posts almost every single night with wild game that her and her husband are eating, and it's taken with a very low quality cell phone camera picture. And the comments that this lady's getting is so encouraging because for me, I'm setting up a studio, I'm taking pictures, I'm because it's my job, and Becky's just out there like dropping hamburger patties with brown gravy and onions on top, and it's just a crappy picture taken of it. And she's like, tonight we're having brown gravy with It's like, but that's what she's eating. And like the story behind her food is so great. And it's just this, older lady who's just enjoying what her husband's bringing home from the harvest. And I think to me, that excites me as much as seeing you post a great rack of, venison chops that are sliced with a demi-glaze on top and wild mushrooms. The food is food, right?
I think it's extremely relatable. I mean, yes, I'm at the point now where I feel like, if I posted every time I ate wild game meat, it would be a post every single night. That's all we eat is like, we don't go and buy red meat. Everything we cook. So like 7 nights a week, maybe 6 nights a week, I'm cooking food that I've hunted.
Yeah,
every now and then my wife goes to the store and wants to have chicken. We don't have native chicken around here, so I don't hunt chicken. So I think seeing posts like that, it's relatable. And again, it ties you back to your childhood experiences. It ties me to my childhood experiences. And I think food is one of those things that just brings everybody together. And it doesn't have to be the fanciest. Some of the best wild game recipes that I've ever cooked are some of the simplest ones too, right? So it doesn't have to be fancy. Now, is it a treat? And is it fun to experiment and see what you can do with wild game? Absolutely, right? You want to have both ends of the spectrum in there.
Yeah, and you're in the same boat I am. I'm allergic to domestic red meat, and so all I can eat is wild red meats, and so that's 99% of what my family's eating. To the point where I just bought this this pressure cooker canner type deal that they do to make like authentic deli style lunch meat. Because I'm smoking turkey breast for smoked turkey sandwiches, but sometimes you just want that flavorful, processed, slice of turkey breast or roast beef or whatever's on there. Well, I can't have all that stuff. So I just bought this machine, and I'm super excited about it because you literally take, like, I've got this whole recipe, this whole idea in my head. It's going to be done this week. I'm going to take wild turkey breasts, and I'm just going to put them in a blender and puree the crap out of them. I'm going to season them up with crazy seasonings, and then you put them into the stuffer, and you stuff it down, and it pressure locks down, and then you literally boil that in water for like 2 to 3 hours, take it out, chill it, remove that, and you have deli meat. You have a all cooked back, almost like what you would think of when you get like sliced turkey meat or sliced ham. But it's that processed ham that's not really ham. So I'm super excited because for me, it's like I'm making lunch meats for my daughters for school, but sometimes they're like, Dad, can you just buy, like peppered? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can, but then I don't know where it's going. It's full of nitrates. It's full of fill in the blanks, right? And so with this process, it's like I'm always looking for the next thing to make wild game. Because again, if I posted every single recipe or every single dinner that I had, but you'd see, tacos every single Tuesday. You would see spaghetti, but it's not. It's what we're doing, and it's how we're elevating, and it's telling a story through our food. Because, and you have it a lot easier where you are in Canada. I'm here in Orange County, California. Like, it's really tough to be in this hunting world and be excited, but it's cool when your daughters go to school and they're telling a story and their friends are wanting to try their lunch because it's, you've never had black bear? But like one of the things on my list is to take black bear, puree that down, mix it, and make like I'm going to smoke it after it's done, and then do like a roast beef with the black bear where it's really sliced thin without doing the roast, because I've done the roast, but you still have all the sinew, you still have all the, all that connective tissue. And sometimes black bear will tend to dry out because you have to cook it to a certain temperature because of trichinosis and fill in the blank, whole nother story. So to take that and make a traditional deli style meat, like I'm beyond excited to try that, as well as I have a freeze dryer coming on Wednesday.
Oh boy. And
so like my wife's like, oh, you're going to be in the garage all day long. I said, well, I've already got,
Oh,
I think I have 100 things that like recipes that I want to do for freeze dry. Cause again, I can't eat all the processed stuff. Like my body doesn't, I can't do all the oils. I can't just, I'm allergic to them all. And so it's like, if I go backpacking for 10 days, I can't take Mountain House. I can't take Peak. I can't take any of these other. So I have to create my own freeze dried meals to take
wow.
with me. And so also looking at the process, like, man, how much money can I save? You know, so say you go out for 7 days and you're eating 2 of those Peak meals a day, right? Breakfast and dinner. Maybe for lunch, you're having a PB&J, you're having a tortilla wrapped with whatever, tuna packets. You're still spending $500-$600 on Peak or Mountain House, like
Oh, yeah.
ready to
It
eat
adds up.
meals.
It adds up fast. And anytime you can put in something else, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's far worse options, but yeah, the ability to prepare things for yourself is huge. And then also, I found some of the best ways. You talk about your daughters taking their food to school and introducing new people and having them try it. I'm still somewhat a purist on a lot of my dishes. I like to be able to taste the animal. Like I don't want to cover
Yeah,
it up with too many seasonings, but I've found that the more I can turn wild game meat into dishes that are less
real.
intimidating and
Yeah,
really familiar to a lot of people, the more people are open to trying it. And then they'll come back the next time. So it's like, bear burgers or bear meatballs or, pulled pork
yeah,
kind of dish out of um, bear, and then all of a sudden people try that or Smokies, and then they come back the next time. They're like, "Hey, do you have any bear steaks?
yeah,
Like, I really like that. I want to see what the actual meat tastes." So it's a great kind of quote unquote gateway drug to
yeah,
create those dishes people are familiar with. So someone like you who can't necessarily eat those other processed meats to be able to have that is great. But I think it's also a really good way as we try and spread the word of, wild games, an amazing resource that people need to be experiencing, and yeah, I think it really elevates the hunting community
yeah.
as a whole when we talk about this side of it. So creating those dishes that people are familiar with that are less intimidating, I think opens a lot of doors as well. So it's really cool to hear about your daughters and at school and sharing their stuff with everybody.
Oh, it's fun, and but that's the reason why From Field to Plate started for me,
Mm-hmm.
was because of the fact that when I went online and looked, I started this company back in 2010 is when I really started it. I didn't quit, I didn't go full time until 2016, but in 2010, so 14 years ago, YouTube really wasn't a thing except for
Mm-hmm.
funny cat videos. And, like there was a couple rednecks on there with golf balls tied up in the hide, pulling it behind a truck. Look how fast I can skin it. And there was really nothing besides like Hank Shaw and some of these other old time wild game chefs who were cooking everything either, super, super high end. And then you looked at the other spectrum and it was like wrap it in bacon or throw it in chili or make it into jerky. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Like those were the two fields that were in this wild game. And so for me, I said, well, this is the meat my family has to eat. And so I have to start treating meat as meat, not as a poor man's food, like throwing it in chili, and not a high end go buy a $400 bottle of black truffle oil to make my duck that already cost me $200 in the day for ammo, driving, blinds, like fill in all this other aspects of the cost of going into that duck hunt. And how can I treat this meat as it's meat? And that really started thrusting me into, okay, looking at it from a perspective of how can I get this more people to eat it? How can I get my kids to eat it? How can I get my wife who didn't grow up in wild game to eat it? How can I get my mom who hates anything that's cooked under well done to eat a steak that's medium rare? Like that became my goal. So when I started like Frenching out the back straps, nobody was doing it. I was getting made fun of for doing it and taking the time. Oh, just cut it off. Just cut the back strap off. Now you can't go on social media without seeing people Frenching out back straps. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
it was the same thing you said. How can I present this in a way that looks less like a deer and more like what they're used to seeing? And that's really kind of the whole process of how From Field to Plate started, was how can I get people excited to eat wild game who are scared of wild game? Changing the it's too gamey, I grew up on gamey mentality, and say, okay, embrace the gamey. Let's figure out how to make this flavor profile work. And, all the rest is history when you look at the whole process of it. So,
Oh, I think the wild game preparation side of things. I can remember when I was growing up, there was times, I kid you not, where we were sitting at the dinner table and I'd be complaining I had to eat another bite of this venison roast that was just absolutely burnt. And my dad said, "Well, we hunted it, so we have to eat it."
yeah,
And back then, like we legitimately hunted to put food on the table. Small town. My dad was a welder. My mom jumped around from a few different jobs and did her thing. But like it was like, well, they were telling us we hunted it, so we have to eat it. And now it's such a switch where I think individuals such as yourself have opened everybody's eyes to it. Where now, like people are knocking our doors down, saying, "Hey, how do I get meat?
Oh yeah.
Or how do I get my hands on this meat?" And you go, you have to hunt for it to be able to eat it.
Yeah.
And it's like a complete switch from, you shot it, so now you have to eat it, to now it's like, well, if you really want to eat it regular, you have to go hunt it, because you can't. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but we're not allowed to profit, or so we can't even in
Well,
Canada. You can't even barter. You can't even barter with wild
it was
game.
the North
Nothing.
American Act of 1919. So North America included Canada and
Oh,
the U.S. So it all came out the same thing. You're not allowed to barter, sell, trade wild game. That's when the like Migratory Bird Act came out too, in like 1917, 1918, where you weren't allowed to like raise the birds, like wild birds, to then sell them. Like,
yeah.
so that's when that whole thing came out. It was the North America Act that came out. So yeah, we're in the same exact boat where even like fish and game guys that I know, I'm like, oh, here's some jerky. They're like, oh, whoa, you can leave it on my, and I'm like, oh, just take the freaking piece of jerky. I don't want anything for it. We're all here eating. And they're like, oh, okay, fine. And it, but there's people at my church who are like, hey, like I'd love some fill in the blank, and I'll give you fill in the blank. And I was like, listen, I'll just give this to you. Here you go, as a friend, as a gift. I want nothing in return. And I make it very, like in the text message, very adamant, like nothing in return. It's illegal. Or I'll make jerky. People are like, hey, where can I buy that? You can't. Or, hey, where can I do this? But during COVID, for me, is when I saw a huge growth in hunters within my own circles, because when meat became scarce during COVID, I had 3 freezers full of meat, completely filled with meat. And so I was taking care packages to people that I knew at church or knew that didn't have meat. I was like, hey, here's Traeger pellets, here's roasts, here's steaks, here's this, here's recipes for them. Put them in a box, leave it on their porch, honk the horn, wave and drive away. And out of those people, I think I did like 26 different families throughout the year and a half when we were like struggling with meats and stuff for people. And 23 of those families are now hunting with us. They're now going out. Their daughters are now hunting. Their husbands are now going out. I've taken them out to different classes. They all started, and they always ask me like, well, what can I do? And I said, the only thing I can't do for you is go get your hunting license. Everything else, I've got guns, I've got ammo, I've got spots, I've got the time, I've got the energy. Take the step, get your hunting license. Once that's done, let's go for it. And now to see these people that are dropping tons of money to go buy gear, to go buy tags, to go do this other thing. It's one of the guys at church is an older gentleman. He's put in for elk now by himself. He's going out to Idaho to hunt elk. It's like, you were scared.
Amazing.
It's like, I took you out on your first antelope hunt when you're in your 50s, and now you're going to go pursue elk by yourself. And it's all because of a bite of food, all because of a care package, all because of me saying, hey, here you go. And as hunters, that's huge. That's what we're called to do, right? It's that whole community, right? When Indians would go out and harvest in buffalo, they didn't keep it to themselves. The buffalo was shared throughout the entire group. There was an article that came out in Field and Stream magazine back in the 50s, and it took place in British Columbia. It was a group of dudes that went out, and it was called like Shot the Lot, and they each grabbed a tag for a different species of animal. So one had an elk, one had a deer, one had a bear, one had a moose, one had and then one had like a goat or a sheep or something, right? So these dudes all went out to hunting camp. They all went and shot their prospective animals. They all brought it back to camp, and they all divvied up the animals evenly. Even though you shot a moose that weighs 1,000 pounds, and I shot a deer that weighs 160 pounds, everybody got an equal share of all the animals. And I'm like, that's the hunting community that I want to be a part of. That's what we need to bring back to this hunting community, is say, hey, we all go to deer camp. One person shoots a deer. Yeah, there was 3 of us there. We got to start, hey, here's deer meat, right? And I think we get so caught up in like, well, this is my tag, my animal, my money, my whatever. Sucks to be you, right? And I think I don't know. I think that's where hunting needs to get back to, is get away from the grip and grins and get into the bringing the community to expand the community.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's building that community behind it. I mean, one of my favorite things about growing up here in Squamish and Brackendale, why I wanted to come back here to raise my son and raise my family is that we did have such a strong community through the outdoors. And I can remember as a little kid, anybody on our street shot a deer, and we would all meet in my neighbor's shop, Al Woods, and the deer would get strung up. Everybody would be excited about it, all the parents, and everybody would they'd skin it. All the kids would get to see it. And then when it was time to butcher, the same thing would happen. Everybody would get together, and it was a butcher party, and it was this community thing. And like when the kids came of age, it was make sure the kids are getting out hunting and everything. And that's a big part of why I wanted to get back into the outdoor industry again later on in life, is that community aspect. And I do think that I'm involved in the outdoor media, so I guess I'm part of the cause. But I do think that the social media side of things and the competitiveness behind people wanting to get the biggest grip and grin or whatever has pulled away from. Anytime you have too much competition, it pulls away from that sense of community, I think, which is a challenge and a balance that people need to find. And I do think I love that there's so many late onset hunters right now, but I do think that a lot of people getting involved in hunting community later on in life and not understanding those core values that maybe are ingrained in some of us from an early age. And maybe the hunting community wasn't as welcoming to them as they expected when they came, because I'm a grumpy old guy. If I go into my hunting spot and there's people there, I mean, I'm excited to see a new hunter, but I'm mad they're in my spot.
Yeah.
So I think some of those challenges do take away from that community aspect. So being able to bring that community back into it all, like you said, and making sure we're all elevating each other or introducing new people, and kind of biting your lip if you see somebody else in your spot and just go, I'm still like, we hunt a lot of public land. You kind of got to bite your lip and be like, you know what? Well, I'm glad there's more people out hunting now, because that's what we need. But we need to get back to that. And I think, starting with food, like that is one of the most basic demands. That's why people hunt, is to put food on the table. So if you start there and share from there, it's only going to do positive things.
Yeah. One thing I started quite a while ago in the dove fields was bringing in as many people that wanted to learn. Because one big thing here, because we hunt a lot of public land as well, because we're on this West Coast where it's a lot of public land, was there's always those forums of people saying, hey, I'm new. I want to understand, I'm new to this thing. Where do I start? And it's like, oh, get boots on the ground. No one's even giving them an idea of where to put boots on the ground. No one's even giving them this thought process. So I was like, you know what, screw it. I started talking to farmers in this area that I've hunted doves openers since I was 6 years old, and started getting permission to hunt 10, 20 acres of crops, right? By putting boots on the ground, going and making the introduction, cleaning farmers' fields. One guy was like, nope, you can't do it. So I grabbed my kids in 110-degree weather, and we started cleaning the outer perimeters of his field, because there was tires and trash and stuff from road stuff. He comes out, he's like, I said no. We're like, I know, but we want to make sure that your property looks good for the future. And he's like, okay, you can hunt my stuff. And, and I brought in 40 new hunters to those fields, and I set the expectation. That old timer came out, and he was sitting there in a lawn chair having the time of his life, as he was watching these new hunters, adults and kids, hunt for the first time. He's like, this is my property, and look at what my property can produce. And look, it's like I brought him into the aspect. But part of that thing is in the morning before we start anything, it's like everyone's there at 3 a.m. I have breakfast ready for 40, 50 people. I have Traegers out there. I'm cooking. I'm in the middle of the field, 110 degrees, pitch black. We're cooking breakfast for all those people. We do a little prayer devotional type deal. And I would say, even if you're not Christian, I don't really care. I am. And you're here hunting with me. So this is what we're doing. And we do it. And then we have, a moment where all these people are talking, and I give specific spots in the field. Like, hey, your party, you've got this part of the field, hunt it. But if you see somebody, respect it, call out the birds. Here's what we're doing. Here's this. And when I started this 8 years ago, the people that came were like, okay, great. Now, this last hunt, we had 49 people that came, and some of the people that were first-time hunters are now bringing first-time hunters, and they're just like, call me. They're like, and we were on the field for 3 days. Opening day, I think we shot 400-plus birds by like 7:30, and people were just like, and then they're coming back in. We always do a biggest bird competition. If you go fishing, the biggest fish competition, right? Everyone puts the money in the pot. It's like, $1 for the biggest bird. And then we do it by wingspan, the tip to tip so everyone's coming back in by 8 o'clock. Everyone's having a blast. But then it becomes this huge communal type thing. People start talking. Hey, let's go. Hey, I'm a chucker hunter. I'm a chucker hunter too. Well, let's go out in the woods. Let's go, by not shying people away from spots. Now I'm like, you know what? Hey, come in here. Let me show you the proper way how to do this. Let me show you the proper way how to manage the land. Let me show you the proper way on how to hunt, how to set up your groups. Hey, you're working dogs. Hey, I notice your dog's running around a lot. This is how you keep your dog in closer. This is right to the point where sometimes I'm walking around and people are like, you going to shoot a bird today? And I was like, oh yeah, I got to shoot birds too. It's fun for me to watch that progression of people who have no idea what they're doing, shoot their first bird. And then, so the opening day we have the breakfast, and then that night I have everyone donate a bird. And then I cook a giant wild game dinner for everybody at nighttime. So now they're not only do they have an amazing wild game breakfast, but at the end of the day, after they've played, they all come back for dinner at the end of the first night. And I'm making 6-7 different dishes saying, okay, don't wrap it in bacon. Don't overcook it. Okay, look, this one's plucked. Yeah, I plucked doves. Okay, this one's breasted out. Okay, this one's skinned. Do you see the difference in the textures and the meat and then everyone sits there and plays cornhole and has a blast. And to me, that's the community that the hunting world needs to get back into. And there's a reason that if you look on my wall, it's all like funky, weird looking bucks, because I'm like, oh, I'll shoot the funky buck. I don't care about the grip and grins. I care about how much did that animal weigh, right? And I think that's huge. And again, do I love the big giant 6x6 bull elks that come walking out thrashing? And if he walked out and a little spike came out, I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna shoot the spike. Of course I'm gonna shoot the big 6x6 because duh, right? First of all, it's bigger body, but second of all, it's a freaking rack on that thing. So don't get me wrong, but when it does come out to, if it's the last day of season and it's legal for me to shoot that 2x2 and it walks out, that 2x2 is going to get a 30-06 to the side of its body. And it's going to fill my freezer. I'm not going to be like, well, I'll wait till next year when that 6x6 comes out. I'm like, no, you didn't know you're going for a truck ride this morning, did you, buddy? So.
No, my patience, or I guess my standards, I should say, when I'm out hunting, certain species I'll be a little more like standoffish, like sheep hunting, things like that. I try and set the bar pretty high, but
there's a
especially when it comes to deer hunting
season, like.
Oh yeah, like deer hunting, something like that. Absolutely, it comes down to my decision making process comes down to how does my freezer look right now, or how do my freezers look right now, and if things are getting thin, we're there to cut tags, and then. Like, okay, as the season goes on and I'm running out of space in my freezer, I'm like, well, I've only got this much room left in the freezer, so let's wait a little bit here.
Yeah, no, and it's even for people always ask me all the time why I don't do my from field to plate classes, why I don't do buck classes. I said, because I did a buck class and everyone competed and compared and waited because one guy came in with a sick 10 point, and then everyone else is like, well, that's only a I'm like, that's a massive 8 point. That's a massive, just real high rack 6, which are my favorite, just a slick 6 coming up. Yeah. And I'm like, shoot it. Oh yeah. But then I'm going to come back into camp. So now I just do does, because a doe's a doe, a big old fat doe or a doe walks out. It's like, there's a doe. They shoot it. And then once the hide's off, you can't tell the difference what a buck and a doe looks like other than size.
No.
But it still looks like a deer. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And I have people all the time when, there's some places I turkey hunt that we had 19 jakes run in at us and start fighting and beating up our decoys. We look over, we see like 3 toms up there strutting. Well, first of all, those jakes aren't going to breed that first year anyway. Second of all, there's 19 of them and 3 gobblers. Of course I'm going to smack, this little super jake with, a 4-inch beard, because he's going to taste exactly the same, and we actually need to thin out the males to make it a healthier pot. Like, there's so many things that go into these factors but again, you get people that's like, I just won't shoot a jake. I'm sorry. They taste delicious, Or the people that will brag on other people. Like, I hate seeing posts of someone that posts a forky. It's like a little girl holding a forky. They're like, I can't believe you shot a fork. And I'm like,
that drives me up the wall.
You're going to ruin this girl's future, And it's like, I think all little kids should shoot forks the first year. Those kids that go out and shoot massive, like mule deers by us that are like 5x5s. It's like, that kid is now going to compare every deer to that giant, massive desert mule deer that has bases the size of Coke cans, 5x5 with a little kicker kicking off the back, not, can't hang a ring on it, so you can't call it. Eye guards that are this big that he also can't call. It's like, go shoot a forky. Let them have fun with it. Let that process of the deer be it. If it's legal, it's legal. It's like, I don't know. People get mad at me all the time for that. And I'm like, I don't really care. I'm not friends
I
with
get
you.
so I get so frustrated on some of those online forums where exactly like first time, even late onset hunter, not even just little kids, but like anybody posts these pictures and it's their first harvest and they've worked so hard. And like you said, they've overcome the, you know, people say, oh, just get boots on the ground. They've figured out where they can go hunt. They've done all this work. They've figured out how to enter this space or to, harvest their first animal. Because for us, it's pretty simple. We've been doing it so long, but for a lot of people, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And they finally go out there and they accomplish in their mind what for a long time probably seemed like impossible. And now they've finally done it and they're so proud and they throw it up there and yeah, everybody's chirping them or I wouldn't have shot that or how could you do that? Or imagine if it had a few more years. And if I opened up my old photo albums and showed you
Don't even
guys
start.
the number of spikes and forks that have passed through our freezers over here, it's unbelievable. Now I'm in a position where I get to spend a lot more time in the field now.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about that pressure of only having like some people only get a very
A
short
weekend.
window of
Yeah.
time to harvest something, right?
Yeah.
And if their goal is to get meat in the freezer, if you have a tag, my opinion is if you have a tag and you are out there and you're following the rules, you've done the research and you're legally harvesting an animal, and that is your decision in that moment to take that animal, what's the problem? Like just because my opinion or someone else's opinion, if I was in that position, would I shoot it? Maybe not. I have a lot more time to be in the field. I don't know their backstory. I don't know what's going on for them. So, like, yeah, to me, I think it's kind of crazy. Now, don't get me wrong. If I see somebody that shoots an absolute monster, I'm gonna go, "Oh my god, that's
We
amazing!"
all will
Like,
because it's,
because that's such a rare opportunity,
yeah, for sure.
and a lot of people work really hard for it. But I get extremely excited. Yeah, you see a new hunter entering the fold, be it a young child or an adult that's 53
Yeah.
and trying their first hunt, like that's extremely, people need to get behind that and pump them up and say that's amazing, good for you, congratulations,
But
and then build them up.
we're so filled with like, I got to be better. I got to be stronger. I got to be this. So much so that look at all these guys in the hunting world that are going out and poaching big deer. Like it's disgusting. And how many of hunting industry elites have illegally done something and now they're no longer hunting elites? And I look at stuff all the time and it just disgusts me because you are in an industry like I'm in the industry. So we see the fakeness behind some of the shows that get put out.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to leave it. We see the fake behind the people that are heads and faces of these television shows, and they then put on this idea that this is how it has to be. So when the average person's like, I have to compare with fill in the blank's name here because I saw it on a show, that's where we start to hurt ourselves. That's why I encourage people to watch your shows, because you're out there talking about it. You're out there pursuing it. You're out there hiking up the hills. You're out there. It's not this, oh, look at me. My camera guy shot this bear. I'm going to throw it on my shoulders and walk out of the woods looking like a badass. Because, I was on one show. It was an elk hunt and we all had elk tags and we were all able to shoot. But the main guy of the TV show, he's the guy. And I shot a freaking, a good one. He shot a good one. One of the producers had a tag and shot a freaking good one. And to the point where the camera guy then radios is like, hey, we got a good one on the ground. Get over here. The dude walks over there, takes trophy pictures, talks about it, does all the stuff. They edited the footage to look like that guy shot that elk. And when it came out, I watched it. I went, what? No, you shot a 4x5. This is a 6x6. 3 times. I mean, that happens a lot in the industry where it's like, or they'll 4 or 5, or, they shoot it with this ammo because they don't like this ammo. And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden, well, Hornady is my sponsor. Well, I shot it with a Nosler, E-tip, all copper, but, Hornady is my sponsor. So let's go ahead and redo that. Let's go ahead and shove these, red tips in the cartridge versus the green tips in the cartridge. And it's like, then you look at the hunting industry and you wonder why people hate us. You wonder why people don't believe us. You wonder why people,
God.
I've been on girl archery hunts where the girls can't succeed on tagging deer with archery. And so the guides go out and shoot them with rifles and the girls walk over and have their bow and do their whole talk. This is what it is. And so that's why it disgusts me. Like someone goes, Jeremiah, why don't you have your own TV show? Because I don't want to be famous. Like I enjoy taking new people out. I enjoy the process. Yeah. I enjoy walking through the woods and meeting somebody and talking with them and developing a relationship and then helping them and encouraging. Like we had a guy come and work on our plumbing. He walked in my garage. I don't know if you can tell here. I'll angle this for a second. So I've got a lot of skulls, a lot of stuff over there on the workbench, right? And this guy, turkeys, skulls, this isn't even everything. This is just some of the cool stories. Everyone that has a story that I like. This guy walks in, he goes, "Oh, Merchant of Death. Oh, this, oh, this, oh, this." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Look at all these death on the wall." And I was like, "Okay, do you eat meat?" He's like, "Oh, I eat meat every single night." I was like, "Well, this is how I eat meat," right? Like, see this, that's a bear. That's what, this is an aoudad. Oh, these are, these right here, these are all turkeys from 6 different states. Like, well, then I was like, "You know what, dude, hold on a second." And I gave him a package of sausage. I'm like, "Just when you get home, cook this up. This is how you're going to cook it." And he's like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," right? He came and did work on one of my neighbors. And I was out doing something. And he comes over to the garage and he goes, "Hey, yeah, what's up? You have any more of that sausage? That was fun." And also, real quick question. Do you have a business card? Because I'd love to learn how I can do this and how I can do. And I went, "You want to be a merchant of death? Like, I got you. Like, we can figure this out," right? And ended up taking him out hunting.
Love it.
And teaching him this process, all because I was like, "Here, try this freaking meat." Right. But if I came off as a jackass to him, it's like, "Oh, what? You want to I don't know. There's a process behind it, and it's very meticulous." And so, again, the reason I wanted you on this podcast was for that reason. Is you and I have the same respect. You and I have the same thing. Yes, we're in different positions by choice. And yes, I love that people can jump on and follow you and all that crazy stuff. We can talk for hours, you and I could. So let's get into the end of this because I think we're running at our hour.
You got it.
And if people want more, then I'll be on your podcast next, and
we'll keep it going. We'll keep the fun rolling.
So part of the summer series is I had everyone on social media submit questions and what they wanted to ask or what their questions were, and I took the top 5 that were asked the most and kind of reworded them back to all the same ones. So answer these however you want. If you don't want to answer them, just say pass. But I don't know why you want it. So, what's your go-to dish you bring to any summer cookout or cookout that you go to? Like, hey, they're like, "Hey, Joe, come to this cookout, bring something." What are you bringing?
Typically wild game burgers.
Nice.
So I find it, like I mentioned, just a good, easy intro meal. People eat a burger and then they'll ask about what it was. And yeah, that's a great intro meal.
Perfect. Well, keep an eye on that one because the very last question, we're gonna circle back to that aspect of burgers. Number 2, what is the most memorable story you have from a cookout or a camping trip around a campfire, sometime where there was food associated with some sort of cookout that you were a part of? Like, what's that one memory that sticks out in your head?
Ooh, you know what? Probably my biggest memories, like that stayed with me the longest in life, would be those butcher parties I was talking about when I was a kid. I can remember every time we were there, we were always supposed to be outside playing because weren't supposed to be in when the knives were there. But as soon as we started hearing or smelling the seasoning salt and the garlic coming from the pans inside, because the dads would always slice up a bit and cook it, we knew we'd get to poke our head in and get a few bites of wild game meat, and it was whatever was getting fried up. It was always the same: some garlic, onions, and seasoning salt on the meat.
That Lowry seasoning salt, dude. That's the old. Yeah. That is the old man's go-to flavor of wild game. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great stuff, like obviously cooking in the field and on the mountaintops, eating sheep ribs and everything. But that's one thing that'll just be ingrained forever.
And hopefully your son has the same experience one day. Like
he already has. He's 2.5, and he's already had a few of those,
he'll have the memory of it.
Oh yeah, memory's not yet, but he's been having it.
What are some essential must-haves for summer cookouts, or in your case, backpack cookouts, hunting cookouts?
For me, just a good shake spice of some sort. So no matter where I am, especially late season, if I'm butchering up an animal and my hands are getting cold or breaking down an animal because I have to pack it out of the bush, I always have a shake spice for me. I bring, it's high mountain season, they have trail dust or some of their venison rub are pretty good ones I bring with me. And I start a little bush fire so I can warm my hands up if I'm breaking the animal down. And I always, because no matter how good you are at breaking an animal down, you're going to have a few of those little offcuts that are just going to be stuck to a bone. And I cut those and I just keep feeding them on sticks like shish kebabs and leave it over the fire. So as I'm going, you pull those off and pop them in. And that's the best meal you're ever going to have, those backcountry snacks like that.
Dude, you're telling me. That's why usually it's like the heart straight out. And the heart, I mean, I literally just take a water bottle, squirt it in to clean out the ventricles. I'm not in there cutting out all the webbing. It's like, dude, a whole heart over the fire, just with like you said, a dusting of whatever that you're doing and letting that cook. And then you just sit there and just slice it off like you would like shaved ham. And people are like, oh, gross heart. Get over yourself. Try it. It's incredible. So I agree with you, especially on that type of thing. And there's nothing better than shoving your hands in a hot gutted animal because you're freezing cold, and then cutting off that meat and then warming up by the fire, eating that same animal that you just warmed yourself up with 45 minutes ago. There's just, I don't know. There's, if you are listening to this, you've never hunted and you want to, there's some experiences that are just ingrained, and eating animals within minutes, hours of harvesting that animal. Let's say what it is, killing that animal. There's nothing more primal. There's nothing more human. There's nothing more
absolutely
ancestral. If you look at like what our ancestors were doing, you look at these young native braves. The reason they would chase down these big animals and they would do it is they would actually, I know it sounds disgusting, they would actually eat the intestines, right? They would eat all the offal because that wouldn't last on the trip home. So they would actually clean out the intestines, and they would actually eat the intestines because the intestines are full of all the vitamins, nutrients, minerals, more than your shot of protein powder, anything else you're going to take in the morning. All the animal eats food, digests in the body, goes in, gets attached to different membranes within the lower, larger intestines. All those intestines then, anything that's waste gets passed on. All the nutrients in that membrane then go into the bloodstream. So if you get rid of the waste, eat the membrane, all the stuff inside, you're actually 100% diving into all the vitamins. So it's like looking back at what Native Americans did, it's like, and all of us are scared to, I touched the guts and now I can't eat a bologna sandwich. Freaking eat the bologna sandwich. What are your go-to side dishes if you had to bring a side dish to a party?
Go-to side dishes, I mentioned it's probably going to be something I've wild foraged. So wild mushrooms mixed in with some sort of dish
Let's
is
say
probably what I'm going to do.
Your favorite mushroom dish.
My favorite mushroom dish would just be probably sauteed pine mushrooms. Salt, pepper, maybe a little bear grease or butter to cook it up, and then sometimes like a light dash of soy sauce or teriyaki on top of that. But just like pine mushrooms, you can do them so they're still a little chewy, or so they're a little crunchier. But you bring those, they'll disappear. And it doesn't matter how many I bring, people fly through them, and then they're mind blown that they're not store-bought mushrooms. They're wild mushrooms.
Oh, dude, that's like same process, but with chanterelles for me.
Exactly.
Oh, because they have that denseness to them. So even if they get a little overdone, you eat them for a party. Money. All right, and last one. Since you talked about it in the very beginning, I told you I'm going to wrap it all the way back up. I know my tips, and I've talked to other chefs. You're the first wild game one. I'm talking to another one today. But what is your tip for the perfect wild game burger? Choose your protein. I think they're all very, very similar, because I know my method for the perfect wild game burger. What is your go-to method for the perfect wild game burger?
Perfect burger. No pressure, eh?
I'll tell you
I
if
would
you're wrong.
say,
Don't worry.
so typically what I do is I'll take my wild game meat, be it venison, like pretty much everything, crack an egg into it, and I use breadcrumbs as well because game meat dries out really fast. My wife's celiac, so we always use gluten-free breadcrumbs, but you find one that'll help retain the moisture. I used to use like oat flour, but now I use gluten-free breadcrumbs, egg, and then I use some mustard, a little bit of honey, and some olive oil in there, and mix that up. And then you can put in a seasoning either in it or on top of it. But I've never had a bad batch of burgers that way. Another way for keeping that moisture inside the burger, especially if I'm fresh grinding it that day, is to get the last little bit of meat through the grinder. I'll throw like an onion or a full onion or half an onion through the grinder last, and it pushes that last bit of meat through, and it saves you a ton of time mincing up that onion. And then that onion in there caramelizes with the burger and keeps it nice and juicy as well. But those are my little tricks
it's
that
funny.
I just gave away.
It's funny how so many of us are so different when it comes to burgers, because I think the biggest thing, like you said, wild game burgers drying out, and I am a purist when it comes to it, like not adding any sort of fats, adding any sort of binders, allowing the meat to bind to itself. And so I think that's huge for me. Wild game burgers, it's grinding or using that ground, but using a thicker ground. So doing it through your plate one time. If you do it through 2 times or double grind, what happens? It becomes very mealy, very, kind of soft.
Yep.
So doing that one solid ground going through your grinder, I do love the onion trick to do that. I know if you are not gluten free, you can also take some chunks of bread and throw that through there because it'll help push and extrude all that meat. And then mixing that meat with your seasonings, everything else, forming your patties, and then letting that patty sit in the fridge for at least an hour, 2 hours. What that's going to do is it's going to allow that meat to bind back to itself. If we throw it right there on the grill, what happens is that meat hasn't had a chance to bind itself back together with all the hemoglobins and all the other good stuff that's in there. And that burger will now solidify. So when you do add it to the grill, it's not going to fall apart. It's not going to dry out because now you have this, it's now one whole patty. Only flip it once. So make sure it's cooked on the one side. Once you start to see it brown on the other side, flip it once. Don't flip it again. Don't flip it as many. More times you flip it, the more moisture gets out of it. That's just burgers 101. And then cooking it to that medium to medium rare. You'll never have a dried out burger. Cause like for me, I can't have eggs. So it's not even an option to add it. So it's like, how can I make this perfect one? And you'd be crazy. You'd be blown away, even doing like wild turkey burgers that have this zero fat, stay together and binded. Once you allow that meat to reform itself in the fridge for an hour or so.
I'm gonna try that. Yeah, I've used primary reason I use the egg in there is just again, and then I add the flour to kind of hold it all together, or the crumbs to hold it all together was because of that. But I also really enjoy. I found that whenever possible, if I grind it right before making the burgers versus using pre-frozen grind, the burger turns out nicer. But I'm probably guilty of making the burgers too fast, throwing them on the grill, finding that they fell apart. So that's when I started,
Yeah.
adding the egg and doing
I'll
that.
even make them in the morning. So like I'll make them at 8:00 in the morning. And if we're going to have dinner at 6:00, they'll sit in the fridge that whole time. Just lightly saran wrapped, or foil wrapped. And then, so I'll take, not butcher paper,
Parchment paper.
Parchment paper. And I'll cut the squares like you would if you were anything. I'll make the patty directly on that square and then stack them, too high or whatever, however many I'm going to make, and then let those sit. So when I go back, I can grab that parchment paper, flip it directly onto the grill, pull that parchment paper off. There's never flipping it. It's never fallen. It's literally in my hand onto the grill, letting that sit. And I've done it with everything from zebra meat to turkey meat, and you fill it in between, the same process. And it's really taking that time to allow it to rest. I think it's huge because meat is a sponge. And so what we're doing is when we're grinding it, we're mixing all the stuff, we're adding moisture to it, and then we put it right there onto the grill. Our moisture is actually on the outside of that meat. So what we want to do by allowing it to chill, we're allowing that moisture to sink into the middle of the meat, get absorbed into that sponge, and it all becomes binded, and then you can cook it. And I'm telling you, it's going to change the way you do it. It's not going to be, because sometimes burgers, when you add breadcrumbs and egg, kind of get a little meatloafy in a sense, where this is going to be more of like a pure ground type burger when you bite into it. But I do, for people that want to get going and want the time, hey, I got to make burgers, I always tell them add an egg, add some binders in there to it. But if you have the time to take the process, like really,
I'm going to try that.
Slow it down. Yeah. And if
You've changed the game for me. I normally I do big batches when I'm a big man. I eat a lot of food. So like I do like a giant batch of burgers when I do it. So one egg and that it's not too much, but I really want to try what you're talking about so I don't have to use that egg and see if I can go back to being a purist.
I'll actually make those burgers. Like last time I did it, I made 20 patties because I'm the same way as you. I don't grind until I need it. Because once it's ground, it's ground. And so sometimes I'm like, dude, I really wanted a roast. I really wanted a steak. Now I've got 50 pounds of ground in here. Well, my family didn't want ground, but if I can take that roast out and grind it, again, you and I both have grinders at home. So that's easier for us. If you're a person that doesn't have a grinder at home and you take it to a processor, understandable. But for me, save it whole until it needs to be ground. You can even mince it yourself with a really sharp knife. But I found that you can even take those patties once they've been solidified, once they kind of have time to bind, you can then take them and single layer them in a vacuum seal bag and vacuum seal them and freeze them. And then when you're ready for burgers next time, you can literally pull them out the day before, they'll thaw. You put them on and they're ready to go straight from the freezer. Another thing, if you were like you said, you're grinding them to order, is if you grind them into a glass bowl that's lined with paper towels, all that extra funk is going to be absorbed in those paper towels, and it's going to make your meat a lot less wet, and that's going to help it bind back when it goes into itself. So, but yeah, if you don't have time, I am 100% there to add that binder to get them going. If you got the time, take the time. Take the time to make a burger that your family's going to go, this is just venison. Like, yep, just venison, a little Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of your seasoning. You want to dust it inside. Yes, sometimes I'll throw some onions, throw some garlic, but most of the time it's the venison with whatever I want to throw in there, garlic powder, pepper, white pepper, black pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, a little bit of smoked paprika, and then just allow that burger to taste like a venison burger. And it just, I'm telling you, it's going to, from wild turkey to fill in the blank, to a deer, to a moose, to a bear, it's all going to be the same. Now with bear, you got to watch out with cooking it well done. So, one cool thing, you can also sous vide those. So take those in a vacuum seal bag, sous vide them to 160 degrees, and then take them off and finish them in a cast iron skillet. And you're going to get a great burger there as well. So, sorry, I didn't mean to take your spotlight. I just want to help you grow.
You didn't take my spotlight. I learned a lot, and my stomach's growling right now. Yeah. I honestly don't know if you can hear it, but it's getting close to noon over here. My stomach's lunchtime.
So awesome.
Big guys get hungry.
Yeah, you tell me. Like last night, I made a comfort meal that I haven't made in a long time. My family hates it, but I'm like, you know what? I don't really care. I've been craving this for a year. And I ate like 3 bowls. My wife's like, you good? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you gonna have it for lunch tomorrow? I said, yep, I'm going to have it for lunch tomorrow too. So anyway, Joe, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can watch you, all that good jazz. I'll throw this all in the show notes at the end. But tell them all your avenues that people can hang out and follow you.
Yeah, if you want to follow me, you can follow along on Instagram. It's just Joe, Joe_Eppele, Eppele. So that's the easiest one to follow me along on Instagram. If you want to watch our content, we're available up here in Canada. We're on Wild TV. And down south of the border, we're on Pursuit, and we're on Cowboy Channel, or you can download the Wild TV Plus app. You can check us out on there. My show's called The Edge. Filming my 6th season with the show right now. And those are probably the best places. You can also find me on Facebook and all of those other platforms, but those are the primary spots. They can go ahead and find me there.
Awesome. Appreciate it, dude. And again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. I know we're both super busy people, but be able to sit down and chit-chat one-on-one with a guy who is very similar in mindset to me is nice, because a lot of times we talk to people who are the exact opposite of us. So appreciate it. Really do.
No, Jeremiah, I appreciate you having me on here, and I've learned a lot today about my cooking. I got a whole new way to make burgers, and right in peak burger season right now. So
dude, try it.
Perfect time.
Try it. Send me a picture and be like, all right, you're an idiot, or dude, thank you. Either way, I won't care. Yeah. Like if you make fun of me, whatever. I've just found it works the best for it. So until then, my friends, this has been the summer series Cookout with From Field to Plate. I'm Jeremiah. This is Joe. And until next time, keep listening and learn how to make a perfect burger.